When sexual offenders speak, what do they tell us about the way they see their relationship with people? What do they say?
I'm Jane,
And I'm Bex,
and this is
Insightful Sisters.
Isabelle. Thank you for coming to talk to us today. Could you just give us a bit of a background to your history, your experience?
My name is Isabelle Thieuleux. I'm a French lawyer in Paris bar. I've been a lawyer for 12 years. Now, that's not my first job. Before that, I used to work in a rape crisis center for the national hotline, French national hotline, for victims of sexual violence. So it's been 19 years I've been working on sexual violence. I'm part of the feminist movement. I mostly work with a group called Collectif National pour les droits des femmes, which is National Collective for Women's Rights. It's kind of platform with association organizations, political parties from the left and left of the left, what we say left of the left, and unions, trade unions. Okay, so I've been working on these issues in very interdisciplinary way. I got a degree in victimology, and I'm still learning a lot about psychotrauma and dissociation issues. That's really, really important because we work with very vulnerable women, very, very vulnerable people. So, I mean, my background, my legal background is really not enough to be able to work and to be able to push new analysis before courts.
So we're here today to talk about the Pelicot case. When we started to read about this in the UK, it was shocking. This is an ordinary grandmother. She's 72. She lives in rural France. And her husband found rapists to accompany him on these crimes from a tiny area. Most of these offenders had come within 60 kilometres. Can you tell us a little bit about the case and how you found out about it in France?
Okay, so we are going to talk about the Pelicot's case, and I have to say right from the start that I'm not part of the trial. This is not one of my case. Okay, so I'm going to give information and make analysis with you according to what I read in the press and what I know from that kind of violence. In France, there is a secret on criminal investigation. That is a principle, a legal principle. But very, very often, a lot of information comes to the press during investigation, before trials, before everything. Sometimes they are linked by the victim because it's important for victims to make them heard, their words heard by people, to defend themselves, even if they are not the one to be defending themselves. Sometimes the police also gives information to the press, okay, because sometimes we don't even have access to the criminal file, okay, criminal case. So there are always information in the press, okay, and in that case, information came even during investigations because that was kind of new. Alors, the sexual violence in itself, Pelicot's case is really shocking, but it's not shocking for us. I mean, for professionals working on that kind of violence, because we know that the reality of this violence, reality of modus operandi of offenders, it goes far, far beyond all we can read in the darkest novel, darkest, fiction you can imagine in your mind. Reality can always be worse. Okay, so it's not really a surprise for us. Okay, it's a surprise because there are videos, because of the way we knew from that case. I mean, the way it started. We're going to talk about that maybe because it's important, and because the huge number of offenders. I mean, it's also a question of logic.
83, we're talking 83 people they've a suspect.
51 accused, one is missing, and around 30 men who were seen on the videos, but police couldn't identify them. They couldn't put a name on them. They couldn't
Yes.
localize them. So
Yes.
people living their best life right now, completely free.
Yeah, yeah. When you started to get details emerging from various reports, so people were reading that this was an older couple. Isabelle Pelicot is 72 now, so she was just almost 70, I think, when this started, and her husband a little bit younger. And reportedly beforehand seen, certainly as outsiders, as this was seen as a happy relationship.
A normal couple. And that's about also how people imagine who are victims of rape and who are offenders of rape. Okay. And what we can see in this case is that mostly regarding offenders, it's everybody. Everybody from 26 years old to a little bit more than 70, I think, years old.
Yeah.
People from all background. Well, not upper class, but I mean, working class. There's a next independent journalist, really different professional backgrounds. So just like,
I think there were tradespeople. There was, I mean, one case that particularly shocked me was a supermarket worker, because Dominique Pelicot took his wife to the supermarket
yes,
to shop, but actually to show her off to this person.
The strategy is really something that can be astonishing for a lot of people. But in fact, when we work on that kind of cases, we know there is always a strategy. I mean, there is no rape by misunderstanding. There is no rape by, circumstances are here. Just they came out of the blue and well, I take profit of that. No, there is always, and we can see how Pelicot, I mean, all this his daily life was about dragging his wife, keeping her alive, but keeping her unconscious for several hours, finding new guys to rape her. I mean, his whole life, his whole thoughts were about the next rape. I mean,
it's just beyond horrendous.
Yes.
I can't find the words for how that makes me feel, really. The betrayal, such a long relationship. To do that to the mother of your children is just shocking.
Yes, for the moment, Giselle Pelicot is saying, well, we had 30 years of good life, 10 years of kind of nightmare, which we know that this reality cannot be so crystal clear.
Yeah, you're suspicious that this is a pattern that would have established itself when he was very young.
Yes, and there are maybe some other kind of violences that may have not been identified yet by Giselle Pelicot or just like any other women victims of domestic violence. It's a long way. It's a long way to understand what are those strategies, and it's a long way to tell yourself, I've been victim of that. I mean, no woman wants to tell herself, I've been raped, I've been treated like an object. Nobody wants that, and it's one of the thing that it's very difficult to identify violence because you really don't want to. You really don't.
No. So I mean, included in his crimes was the drugging of his wife and putting her life in danger over a long period of time. And then actually controlling, because this is all about control, isn't it?
Yeah.
Controlling her treatment because her children thought she had dementia or something neurological problem. She had lots of gynecological problems, you know, and he went to the appointments with her, didn't he?
We're not talking about drugs. We're not talking about cocaine, heroin, or things like that. We are talking about medication that you can be given to by your doctor, by your
Pharmacy. Yeah.
pharmacy. So this is not something you need a dealer for.
No.
It's something easy, and most of the time, cases with chemical submission.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Drugging of
drugging, it does not involve illegal drugs. It involves medication, drugs that are very simple to get. So that's the first thing. There is something about health professionals in this case,
yes.
which is really, really, I mean, not surprising. I'm not so surprised because health professionals, they don't have so much training about violence against women, even domestic violence.
Yeah, but the gynecological problems, I mean, you know, even in a long marriage, there are infidelities. I can't imagine that any health professional would think that the gynecological problems were okay not to test for STDs. And that didn't happen, did it?
That didn't happen. And there may be a question of liability. I mean, that could have been a part also of the proceeding. Maybe it was not possible. Maybe the investigative judge didn't go into that part. Maybe Gisèle Pelicot's lawyer didn't want to go into that part. But there is a question of medical liability that must be that we must talk about that. Most of the time, health professionals are witnesses, indirect witnesses of violences, okay? And they need to really get skills on violences, to identify violences, automatically ask questions, ask directly the questions to their patients, and I mean, dig a little bit into the patient's life to be able to maybe identify forms of not only domestic violences but sexual violences in childhood, or because we know there is a link. There is really a link between the trauma in childhood and what we call adverse experience in childhood and health issues when you are an adult. I mean, cardiovascular issues,
diabetes, yeah.
Diabetes, kind of pathology, which can be directly, well, there is a link between having suffered from violences, sexual violences, and health issues 20 years after that, 30 years after that.
Yes, yeah. How was the crime eventually discovered? What happened? How did Isabelle discover?
It's really interesting to talk about that because we could have never known about that case. Okay, and it's really thanks to one guy, one security guard in a supermarket in 2020, who saw Dominique Pelicot in the supermarket, taking videos or pictures of underwear, women underwear, what you call upskirting.
Upskirting, yes.
Video, but the video of the security guard was leaked to the press, and it's interesting to see that he saw Dominique Pelicot following one woman, two women, three women, and then he went. Well, I mean, He went to see Dominique Pelicot and says, "Give me your phone. Give me your phone. I saw you on the CCTV. I saw what you did." And he was really pushing women to complain, to feel a complaint, saying it's important.
Good guy.
He did that. Look, he did that to you because women didn't notice anything. Please feel a complaint, and that's really, really important because without that, moment,
Gosh, yeah,
we would
yeah.
never have.
No,
And it's really important to say
yeah.
in terms of sexual violence, there is no little sexual violence,
No.
okay? Whether it's exhibition
Mm-hmm.
or that kind of offense. Well, I mean, filming, maybe you can say, well, that's not such a big deal. Well, I don't have the time to go to the police station. I don't want to deal with that. No, it's really important every time you face even sexual violence, which does not involve physical contact, which does not involve physical attack. It's really important because you can just discover or rediscover someone who maybe already has a record, a criminal record for that kind of case. Maybe an offender who is at the beginning of his criminal journey. Okay, let's say it like that. And that was really important that those women feel the complaint. And then there is another really important thing, is that the first policeman, local policeman who received the complaint, who interrogated Dominique Pelicot the first time, who took the telephone from Dominique Pelicot and discovered all those thousands of pictures and videos
Wow.
of his wife. They made a huge work within a few weeks with really not so much resources. Okay, and they were exposed, I mean, during weeks and weeks and weeks.
At what point did they contact Isabelle and talk to her about it?
There are 2 months, 2 months and a half between the first arrest.
Yeah.
And then they asked Dominique Pelicot to come back to the police station. And at that time, he thought he would get his computer or telephone back. I mean, he was sure it was nothing.
Yes.
And in fact, he was put in custody because during investigation, you could put someone in custody for 24 hours at the police station for 24 hours, and that 24 hours can be can last another 24 hours if the prosecutors say, okay, we need more time for investigation. So there were 2 months and a half between those two moments, which were very, very important. And that's really something we can be disappointed about, is that Pelicot's trial is not in a criminal court. We used to judge rape, which are called cours d'assises in France. A few years ago, government decided that it would be better to create a kind of lower criminal court, which are called cour criminelle départementale, without jury. So it's a new kind of criminal court without jury. It's a question of money. It's really a question of money, because cour d'assises, you have a jury, so you have to give a little bit of money to that people who cannot work during the time that they are involved in a trial, etc. So, and it takes time, and it's really a justice, kind of justice I really like, because you really have time to go deeper in investigation, because it's an oral proceeding, so you make all the trial or the investigation, you talk about everything. And most of the time in cour d'assises, investigators, police or gendarmes who investigate the crime, they come and they testify, and they can explain how they led investigations, etc. And in that case, in the Pelicot case, the really first policeman who worked and who saw videos and who identified those men, etc., they were not asked to come and testify in court. And I think that's not a good point. You know what I mean? Only because after that, the case was given to a specialized service, law enforcement force really specialized sexual violence. So they made a huge work. And without that, we would have never known about anything, and it would have continued for her.
Wow, it's shocking. I'm aware of time, and I'm going to pass across to Bex because I know she's got some questions for you on the law itself. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm sort of really interested in the legal perspective of this, and one of the key discussions that has come out of this is consent. There's been a lot of excuses that we've heard about, oh, I didn't think that I needed her consent for this reason or that. A part of the difficulty that we seem to have around consent is trying to codify it into law, and trying to find a legal definition of consent that sort of fits the bill in every case. Do you think that that's something that's doable?
We have to be aware that in the French definition of rape, there is no consent. Okay. Rape is about sexual penetration. We still have the difference between sexual penetration or acts without penetration, which are labeled sexual acts without penetration. With violence, threat, surprise, or duress. Okay. There is no the word consent, and for me, but it's my opinion. It's my opinion as a feminist activist, and it's my opinion as a lawyer. It's a good thing that there is the word consent is not here, because when the problem is that everybody has that consent in mind. I mean, everybody thinks in the population, but also policemen, judges, investigators, everybody, lawyers, think that rape is a sexual intercourse without consent. It's not that. It's really about destroying someone. It's really about hatred of women and children. It's taking power on someone and destroying someone. It's really an act of domination. Okay, it's not something that, well, there was a misunderstanding. It's a bad sexual intercourse with misunderstanding. I could not understand that she was not. She didn't agree with that. Okay. So the problem is that everybody thinks about consent. So the focus is put on the victim, and everybody focus on what did she say, what did she not say, what did she do, how did she react, why you didn't do that, why you didn't say that, why you didn't cry, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And when you spend your time on that questions, you don't spend your time trying to understand what you call in England and USA d'envoi, and what we call in France offender strategy, which mean all that things that are common to different acts of sexual violence. Mostly how the offender use trust or build a trust for you not to understand that is an offender, sexual offender, how he isolated you socially, geographically, okay, physically, how he made you, how he terrified you, okay, because when you want to create sideration, is that the good word? You know, when you freeze the state, when you're really afraid in the trauma, it doesn't come out of the blue. I mean, the offender did something or said something which puts you in that state. Okay, that is not that it's something on purpose. Okay, And then everything that is made to feel you guilty, because you know sexual violence is the only crime where the victim feels guilty and the offender has no sense of guilt. Okay. So I mean, we need to focus investigation on that if we want to establish rape, if we want to establish the duress, the notion of duress in the offense. Okay, but as everybody talks about consent, you know, that's also a reason why well, there are not so much investigation, not so much prosecutions, and not so much judgments for sexual violences in France.
I think it's really interesting because, I mean, across the board, consent is often considered the center of these sorts of trials. And it's true what you sort of touched on there, that turns the victim into the center of all inquiries. Like you say, it sort of becomes about, well, did they communicate that they weren't okay with it? We have a wealth of knowledge into offending patterns, criminal psychology, and patterns of abuse. Why isn't that used more in court when we're making these judgments?
That's the question. That's really, really important question, because we have all the feminist knowledge, because feminists build that Darvo thing, and it's thanks to feminists and hotlines and blah blah and all the work done to understand identify and understand those patterns. And now we have, since 40 years, we have scientific research on trauma. We have scientific research on everything, which can give so much good explanations. The problem is that this knowledge doesn't come into criminal court, doesn't come into investigation, unless we as lawyers try to push and push and push really hard to face judges with all that objective knowledge. You know, it's not something it's not an opinion. It's not an opinion, it's an expertise on something. And there are a lot of resistance from the policemen, but also, and I think more than the policemen, judges are really, really reluctant to face. Working on sexual violence is not easy, because your life can change. I mean, you can face your own trauma, your own patterns of violence. You can have to face your own family history. So that's, if you are really honest, that's not so easy. Okay, so now there is a big public debate, and I was yesterday in an official meeting with members of parliament, because now there are a bill proposal to change the law and make the words consent in the law. And the problem is also that consent is the way sexual offenders defend themselves, because they always say, well, she consented, or I was not aware, that I couldn't understand that she was not okay. Okay, that's lies. Okay, sexual offenders lie all the time, and it's not a problem. We know that. And in a legal perspective, I mean, in the defense right in France, they have the right to lie in court. They have the right to lie to judges. They have the right to lie to investigators. Okay, let's not touch on that issue, because it's not a problem. We know that when they speak, and we really have to also use the whole knowledge about how, when sexual offenders speak, what do they say? What do they tell us about the way they see other people as an object? Okay, the way they see their relationship with people, the way they see the world. Okay, And some of even a lawyer in France, I mean, from an academic background, wants to take the legal defense, the consent legal defense out of sexual violence, saying in some kind of circumstances, we must offender, the accused must not use consent as a legal defense. And I say, I don't agree with that because I say, okay, let's use that for what it is. I mean, for another clue because we use different proofs, in fact, to prove sexual violence. The testimony of the victim is it's really the central proof. Other testimonies are very important. Forensic psychology reports are very important because you can prove the trauma, you can prove everything. But also, let's work a little bit more than we do actually about the speeches of sexual offenders, because it's really important, and it must be used. We should use it in court. The problem is that work is supposed to be done by forensic psychiatrists and forensic psychologists in court and in investigation. We have a huge problem in France with forensic psychologists and the way they are not really skilled on that issue, and yet they must give judges explanations about, is this man a sexual offender? And we saw this week in the Pelicot trial, forensic psychologists in their reports having this small sentence, Mr. Blah blah is not a sexual offender, or something like that, which is crazy because those people, they say, well, yes, a lot of them said, I raped Gisèle Pelicot. I'm not a rapist, but I raped Gisèle Pelicot. Okay, because I mean, there are videos, so obviously
it's undeniable. It's such an extreme form of cognitive dissonance in a way.
Yes, but that cognitive dissonance is really a clue. Okay, it's not when sexual offenders testify before policemen, judges, etc. They don't give an objective testimony. They don't talk about what happened, what really happened. They talk about what they say, what is going to give them impunity for the rest of their life. Okay, so that cognitive dissonance is really an important clue to understand if we are in front of a real sexual offender. Okay, and it's also a clue to evaluate a kind of danger. Okay, and if that offender, maybe if there is a risk, is going to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying sort of, rather than ban discussion about consent or any of these things, actually let them speak and really analyze and dig into what they say to look for them signs that actually this is someone that's manipulating, not just has manipulated their victim, but is actually even trying to manipulate in court.
Yes, because it's really the offender strategy doesn't stop after the attack. Okay, because the first objective of those guys is committing violence. I mean, but once it's done, the strategy is not over, because they need to be sure that the woman is not going to tell anybody, or it's not going to report them to the police, etc. And even if when they are reported, they must convince the people in front of them that no, they are not rapists. They are not rapists. You know, a rapist is those guys, those predator, that you can see on TV show or something. But it's not me. Look, I'm a doctor. Look, I'm a teacher. Everybody loves me.
It's so interesting that you say that, because someone, a smarter woman than me, and one that I've forgotten, told me once that the first victim of grooming by abusers is the audience.
Mhm,
Before they even locate a victim, they're
mhm.
creating an image of themselves and they're grooming the people around them, so that when allegations come to light, it's easy to say, he would never. Oh my God, he's not the type.
Yes.
And the victim is then isolated with very little support. They often, we don't discuss enough, I think, how often abusers will move through their whole life trying to create a backstory
Yes. Yes.
to cover for themselves when they're discovered, or if they're discovered.
Uh-huh. And they will use so much, they can bring 40 testimonies to the policeman, 40 people saying, well, he's a good guy. You can see at the Pelicot trial, even the ex-woman or actual woman, actual wife or of accused men saying he's a good guy. I mean, he did something wrong, or but he's a good guy and he's a good father and everything.
Yeah, it's disturbing when you see the level of effort that's put into building a life where they're able to abuse. Um, So, I mean, on the topic of violence towards women and consent, there is a movement that has sprung up in the last few years, and I'd be interested if you're aware of it and your thoughts, that's called We Can't Consent to This. And
Mm.
it's risen up in response to the rise of young women dying through strangulation or sexual violence, and men claiming she wanted it, she enjoyed being strangled. And the, the the point is to record these cases, and in a very similar vein to what you've suggested, to say actually the consent of the women is immaterial, whether they consented or not. We need to look at the violence and the intentions of these men. Have you been aware of these cases or that movement at all? I mean, I'm sure through your work you have.
I've seen a little bit, and the way offenders use the rough sex defense also. I mean, that's a part of the conversation we had with members of parliaments, because if they rewrite the criminal code saying that rape is a sexual intercourse without consent, and that maybe with violence, duress, threats, and surprise. I'm like, I don't understand. Really, really, it makes no sense to me. What is a rape without violence or without duress? I mean, what is it? What kind of situation is it? And does it mean that you can consent to a violent sexual intercourse from the point that you consent, everything is possible? Is that really what we want? Is that really the kind of discussion that we want? Is that really the kind of pedagogy we want to teach, I don't know, children, to teach everybody? Do we really have to go in that conversation? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's a good idea. Really not. Okay, even if um, we have been said, well, let's also use the context, the environment, etc. And I'm just like, okay, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it simple for everybody, and please do not add confusion. Okay, because confusion, I mean, it's also a part of sexual offender strategy. They want you not to understand that it's violence. Okay, so they will do everything, they will say everything for you to not to identify the violence. And if we do that, in our daily life conversations, etc. But it's a thing. But if we do that in the redaction of the criminal code, if we put it that really unclear, that is not going to help us at all, at all.
Definitely. I mean, it's an interesting debate. I have heard detractors on the other side saying that that we're infantilizing women when we say that they can't consent to sexual or intimacy violence, or when we say that their consent is to some extent immaterial if what we're trying to recognize is a pattern of violence from the man. I mean, what are your thoughts on that take?
It's two philosophies. We cannot agree, we cannot find a consensus between us. We really see the world in two different ways. One part claims sexual freedom and right of sexuality, freedom of sexuality. We are trying to fight to defend fundamental rights and the rights to physical integrity. I mean, the most basic fundamental rights, it's dignity and physical integrity. Okay, violence is not about sexuality, and consent is a very, very confusing notion, putting back an act of violence in the field of sexuality, which is a huge problem. And let's make it clear, okay? And we saw that in the Pelicot trial, the huge role of pornography in that, okay? Taking pictures, videos, linking videos to the net, confident. I mean, I was not aware of the Coco website or forum of discussion, etc. There are so many places where men can organize themselves, can find themselves. Offenders can find them very easily. I mean, and they use pornography and the use. Of course, there is a link between pornography, the use of pornography, how it's so easy for children to get access to pornography, to violent images, to violent videos, and the prevalence of sexual violence in our society. Of course, there is a link.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of change with the rise of the internet and with the rise of technologies such as smartphones that I think I've seen a statistic for the UK saying that the average age that a boy would first see pornography is 8 years old. And obviously the effect that that would have on the psychology of a child, won't be fully understood, I think, probably until a few decades on when we're sort of looking back. But right now it does feel that we're sort of on the front line of a sweeping change, and perhaps our courts, our systems, like you've mentioned, medical staff, training, is actually not keeping up and it's not up to scratch. I mean, what do you see as the way forward then?
I was thinking about what you said earlier. In that context, how can women be free? Okay, how can women be free of living their life, peacefully and safely? And there is another thing I'd like to say about that. It's the whole consent talk. That's really something about heterosexuality also. I mean, it's like when you have a man and a woman, there is a potential of sexuality. And I'm like, guys, well, I'm lesbian, I'm a radical lesbian, so there's no point for me of anything sexual with a guy. Okay, so what do we do about that? What are you trying to? You're talking about freedom of sexuality. You're just talking about heterosexuality, and we know heterosexuality is a part of the patriarchal system. Okay, injunction to heterosexuality, injunction to maternity, to motherhood. Okay, it's a part of the patriarchy. So everything, there is a huge bias. There is a huge bias in that kind of conversation. Well, we all need, every one of us, we all need to face violence but maybe firstly within our own family, our own families, our own history. Okay, that's the first thing. And that's why I say it's really not easy, because you cannot live your whole life thinking sexual violence, it's poor people drinking too much alcohol, raping their kids, blah blah. No, let's face it. Okay, we have been victims. We all have friends who have been victims. And be honest. Just be honest. If you really want to be on our side, the first thing is be honest and face it. Okay, and look into your own story. We all need to learn. We all need to heal. It's many things. Many things. Being in solidarity, women to women, having our own spaces to talk about that. Be humble. And when you're a professional, maybe just be humble.
That's really interesting. And I mean, I liked what you said there about there's a bias and that this discussion is centering really on heterosexuality. And I think that there's more discourse that I'm seeing now, especially among the younger generation, around this and recognizing the scope of it, that it's not just about relationships and your own life, but it follows right through to, for example, the abortion debate in America at the moment. And we're seeing men responding to Trump's win with phrases like your body, my choice, and they're reveling in this ownership and entitlement to women's body. And we really have to break that down and get into the heart of the issue here, which is the patriarchy, and it is entitlement and ownership of women's bodies.
Because far right is on the rise everywhere, in Europe too, and in France too, and we're really afraid about that. And everything is linked. I mean, we know the far right doesn't defend women's rights, and it's really a euphemism to say that. And when we don't face those kind of violence, we created also political violence. So everything is linked. Everything is
Yeah, absolutely. It's all connected together. Isabelle, this has been absolutely fascinating, and thank you so much. I'm sure I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners will too. If people want to know more about this topic, where can they start researching, or where would be a good place to look, do you think?
Well, you must look. For me, it's important to learn how to identify those patterns of violence. Okay. Identify the patterns. I learn about the Darvo thing. And there's a book, I think someone, I saw it on Twitter a few months ago. Someone recommended an old book, which is called The Gift of Fear, written by an American guy who runs for decades a security corporation. Okay, and that's really about trust your instinct. Okay, and as a woman, we have instinct. We have a very strong instinct, and we also have the whole society which try to put that instinct down and force us not to listen to it, force us not to feel it since we are little girls. So let's reconnect ourselves to that. We know sometimes we cannot explain that, but it's the brain. It's not a magical thing. It's really the brain, something on your survival area of the brain. Sometimes you just see someone, you just see, or you see a man, and you cannot explain even before you feel it, or even before you're conscious of something is wrong. You have no explanation, but you know something is wrong. Okay. I'm not telling that we are responsible for our own safety. I'm just telling because we're not guilty. I mean, we're never guilty when something happened to us. I'm just saying we have to, danger is everywhere. Dangerous men are everywhere, and they have very, very sympathetic faces. I mean, they look nice, they speak nice, they can, they can help you to carry your bag or something, or I don't know. They can be very nice guy at first sight, but in fact, no. So let's reconnect, let's learn and reconnect and feel.
Isabelle, that's amazing. Thank you.
It's been fascinating. I can't, I mean, the fact that you've been able to look at this one case, take us through the law, but then perhaps take us through some of the psychology behind this is just fabulous and really, really interesting for listeners, and it's given me a lot to think about, actually. The things that you've said that I've not really thought about before, or not really thought, particularly consent law, because that's such a big part of UK law.
I suppose what we'll do now is we have a final question that we like to ask people, Isabelle, and we ask every week for your woman of the moment. So that's somebody who inspires you or who you'd like to give more of a platform and a voice to. Who is your woman of the moment?
I'm always so touched by my, emotionally touched by my clients. And I really, in particular, my refugee clients, women escaping excision, women escaping forced marriage and family violence, mostly for my practice, women of Southwest Africa. And I'm really always surprised, but in admiration, in total admiration about how they resisted, I mean, to their own condition, how they were, how they had that feeling that they need to escape to survive, and what did they do to survive, and what did they do to organize their runaway. I mean, and really, they are my champions. My clients are my champions because they faces so much adversity. And we share that really important survival instinct and that conviction, really deep conviction that there is another life possible. Whether you have to leave your family, whether you have to leave your country, whether you have to leave an abusive husband, there should be another life possible. And I may face very difficult situation for that. I may be for a moment very isolated, but when we found each other, when we can talk to each other, and we share so much in our story, even if we don't come from the same country, we don't share the same religion, we don't have the same skin color. It's details. It's female condition. It's our story. It's what
Community of women.
Yeah.
That's really moving.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, this has been an excellent interview. We won't take up any more of your time, but thank you so much for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Bex. And I apologize for my English because it's not my native language, so I'm just
English is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. And of course, thank you so much to our listeners. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please take a moment to like it, share it, and leave a comment. This will help our podcast to grow and hopefully help us to bring you lots more interesting topics in the future. Thank you very much.